Those two rainouts on Wednesday and Thursday between the Atlanta Braves and the New York Mets could benefit the Milwaukee Brewers next week and give them a little bit of advantage. We'll talk about that coming up next here on Locked On Brewers.
You are Locked On Brewers, your daily Milwaukee Brewers podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Everybody, welcome to Locked On Brewers. Chuck Freeman, your host here on Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Longtime sportscaster here in the state of Wisconsin. Another longtime sportscaster is going to be joining us. Longtime on TV in Milwaukee, Lance Allan. Lance Allan, Coach Allan. Not Tim Allen. Lance Allan is going to be joining us. I'll be on Tim's show on Friday night. But anyway, you know, the hurricane, the dreadful hurricane that's moving in the southern part of the state, causing a lot of rain down there. So the Atlanta Braves and New York Mets are supposed to play a doubleheader. Supposed to play single games Wednesday and Thursday. Now, since they can't play, they're going to play a doubleheader on Monday if that factors into the wild card. So the Brewers may not know until Monday night who will be coming into Milwaukee. Now, it creates just a nightmare of travel for the New York Mets because the Mets will be in Milwaukee Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Then they may have to go down and play a doubleheader Monday in Atlanta. If it's got wild card implications, if there's not a for sure that they're going to play those two games Monday, but if it has wild card implications, they will. Otherwise, Commissioner Rod Manfred could cancel that game, that doubleheader, if it doesn't have any meaningful, if it doesn't have any meaning toward the postseason. So the Mets could be here Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, go back down to Atlanta for a doubleheader on Monday, and then come up here Tuesday, Wednesday, and maybe Thursday. They could play 5 games in like 4 days and completely throw their pitching staff off track. Same with the Atlanta Braves, who are fighting for a playoff spot. They don't want to have to play 2 games on Monday and then possibly come up here on Tuesday. So you'd have some pitchers of the Mets, according to Will Salmon of The Athletic, you'd have a couple of pitchers. None of those pitchers on the Mets in the starting rotation have pitched on 3 days rest. And that's what would have to happen if they played a doubleheader, unless they used an opener in one of those games. But it's looking like the Mets are going to be very short on pitching if they have to be in Milwaukee for game 1 on Tuesday night, if they got to play this doubleheader on Tuesday. So hopefully the Brewers can beat the Mets and make them forced to have to play that game, the doubleheader down in Atlanta, and tax them as much as possible. Tax them as much as possible. But Will Salmon, the reporter, of The Athletic, a reporter with The Athletic, says, they will not, none of their starters will have regular rest beginning on Tuesday if the Mets make the wild card. And if they're in Milwaukee, that would be just great. But again, there's some thought that if nothing can be gained out of Monday's doubleheader in Atlanta between the Mets and Atlanta, Rob Manfred, in all his wisdom, may cancel it. So anyway, that's just a sidebar. That's something that's popped up today with the Milwaukee Brewers. So we possibly couldn't know, again, their wild card opponent until on Monday night when this all gets settled. A lot to get settled. Brewers could have a factor in this as well because they play the Mets this weekend, as I talked about. It doesn't look at all. You know, I've been touting them getting a top 2 seed. Their loss to Pittsburgh pretty much finished that off. Their loss to Pittsburgh, a 2-1 loss. The Dodgers were in a tie game as I was doing this podcast. Philly did beat the Cubs. So at last check, Milwaukee had 68 losses, Dodgers 64, Philadelphia 65. It's just not going to happen. The Brewers will be playing next Tuesday, Wednesday, and possibly Thursday. I thought Freddy Peralta pitched great. I thought Freddy went out there and did well. He got the loss, gave up 2 hits, 2 earned runs. Was one of those nights where the Brewers just could not hit. One of those that we've seen so often. But Freddy, 7 Ks, his final start. He'll be the game 1 starter, whoever it is, next Tuesday. But Freddy makes his final start, looks sharp, says he's ready, he's healthy, he's got his mind straight, he is ready for game 1. It was asked in the locker room after the game on Wednesday night, does it matter? He said, nope, Doesn't matter because they're all good teams. And they are. They're all good teams. It's just, and I'm going to ask Lance Allan a while when he's on the show who he'd rather face, because honestly, as we said, whether it's the Mets or whatever, even on this short rest, there's a reason why these teams are going to be in the postseasons, because they've won the allotted amount of games. They are good baseball teams. They're good baseball teams. So, and like I said, it still scares me that the fact it's a best of 3 in a shortened series. But nonetheless, the Brewers will move on and take on the Mets coming up this weekend. They have one more game in Pittsburgh. It's an afternoon game on Thursday, 11:35 on Sirius XM. The SXM app, search Brewers. You get all 162 of Brewers baseball. We'll come back. Lance Allan's going to join us shortly here on Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Booking.com. Maybe you're going to go on the road with the Milwaukee Brewers in the postseason. And that's something you want to do. Booking.com. Yeah. The right state can make you a fan of any city. Philadelphia, Los Angeles, those seem to be the 2 spots where the Brewers could be headed if they win their wild card round. 2 cities, got a lot of baseball history. You got the warm weather out in Los Angeles. You got the historic Philadelphia. Book today on Booking.com, the official accommodation partner of Major League Baseball. They're also good for vacation rentals, resorts, bed and breakfasts. I use Booking.com to book my golf trip every year down to Scottsdale, Arizona. It's a great resource. So any Brewer fan heading to Philadelphia, Los Angeles to catch a baseball game, one of these playoff games, they want their team to win, but it's also exciting to check out the places in those towns and all that. So that's why so many people go on the road. They go on the road, they visit the city, they take in the sights and sounds, and then they see the Brewers in a postseason game. We see it with Packer games as well, as so many travel to Tennessee this past week. So the right state can make you a fan of any U.S. city, even your baseball rivals, in this case, the Dodgers and the Philadelphia Phillies. Booking.com, booking.yeah for all your booking needs, hotel, airport, you name it. Flights, they have it there on booking.com. Chuck Freeman here on Locked On Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. And Rowdy Tellez didn't talk about this yesterday. The former Brewer, he had a bobblehead here. He had a short, but people loved Rowdy Tellez in a short stay here, and they were sad to see Rowdy got DFA'd by the Pittsburgh Pirates a couple of days ago. He needed four more at-bats for a $200,000 raise. Now, of course, no one's going to feel sorry for these athletes, but still, for Rowdy, he's trying to get every dollar he can at this point of his career, $200K, and the Pirates do him like that. That'll bode well for the Pirates in the future as far as collecting free agents down there as they try to build their franchise. But there shouldn't be those type of incentives anyway. Gets down to the end of the season, Rowdy needs 4 at-bats, and they DFA him so they don't have to pay him the $200K. GM there sounds like he had no idea at all. Sure, right. You knew darn well that Rowdy is 4Ks away from collecting that $200K. That's why you cut him. No, some of these guys think some of these GMs, coaches, and managers think we're just absolute idiots as fans, the media, that we can't figure this stuff out. They lie to us, lie right to our faces. And we challenge them, they get mad. And there's nothing we can do about it. They get mad, and they start shouting at us, and we look like fools on TV. Jackson Chourio, by the way, did you see the little video with John Morosi in the diner? I don't know what diner it is. It's probably, I don't know if it's a diner in Arizona or if it was done in Milwaukee. My guess, it was probably done in Arizona, where Robin Yount lives. It might have been done this past weekend because Robin lives out in the Scottsdale area. It showed Jackson and Robin sitting at a bar, and Robin Yount gives Chourio an iPad, and it's game 5 of the American League Championship Series against the Angels. Rod Carew, one of the best hitters in the game, hits a ground ball to Yount. Yount throws the Cooper at first base, and jubilation, and fans run. This is back when fans used to be able to run on the field when their team won the pennant, and the Brewers won the American League pennant. were going to the World Series. It was bedlam. And Robin showed Jackson this on the iPad, and Jackson Chourio welled up. It got to him. For a 20-year-old kid to show that emotion, that something like that means something to him, I thought that was pretty cool. It was darn cool. So very cool story. And I guess that's going to be on the MLB Network, that little visit, sometime on Thursday, where they show Robin Yount giving Chourio an iPad so we can view the final out of the 82 American League Championship Series, the only American League pennant, the only that's back when the Brewers were in the American League. All you youngsters out there, that's when the Brewers were in the American League. They're only American League pennant, and they're only American or National League pennant. But I think that diner was probably in Scottsdale. It was probably done last week. All right. Lance Allan talks some Brewers baseball with us. We'll see what he thinks the Brewers, their chances of making a deep run are going to be coming up here beginning next week. I can't wait. We're only a couple of days away. Chuck Freeman, Locked On Brewers, part of Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Get us on Google, Spotify, Apple, on all the major downloads, wherever you download your podcast. Please go to our growing YouTube page, search Locked On Brewers, hit the subscribe button, hit the bell. October is coming, and we are going to have this covered like a blanket, doing shows, covering the games. All the postseason games will have all covered. I'll be in the locker room doing stuff. I'll have some insight and all that. So it'll be really, really fun beginning next week. I hope it's more than a 3-day stay in the postseason. Lance Allan joins us next on Brewers, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Lance Allan joining me just in here in a moment or two. PrizePicks, America's #1 daily fantasy sports app, over 5 million active members. PrizePicks, the easiest, the most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Unlike other apps, PrizePicks, it's you against the numbers. All you do is pick more or less 2 to 6 player stat projections and watch the winnings roll in. You could win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 picks. Yeah, that's right. You can over and under, maybe on Caleb Williams coming up on Sunday. Any way you want to work on it, maybe like over under on a rushing yardage, or somebody getting a base hit here this weekend or the postseason, whatever you want to do. What you got to do is download the PrizePick apps today. PrizePick app, and use that promo code Locked On MLB. You'll get $50 instantly off when you play the $5. So you go to Locked On MLB, or use that promo code Locked On MLB on PrizePick. You get $50 instantly. You don't even have to win your play. You just got to play the $5. You don't even have to win to get that $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks. Run your game with PrizePicks, but you can't play unless you download the app first of all. My guy Lance Allan joining us here. Good to see you, Lance. Looking good. Looking like a normal TV guy, unshaven, who has been on the air for a couple of days.
I've got my I should have my leather bound books of mahogany and all this, like an Anchorman stuff, but I at least got the formal dining room here look.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Hey, appreciate you joining us. Talk a little Brewers. You've been through this, as we all have, lifelong Brewer fans and all that, and you in the media for decades. So far, this run the Brewers are on right now, did you think that eventually during the season that it was going to go south on them, because they kept going? They've never had longer than a 3-game skid, and they're rolling along with 90 wins right now.
Yeah, I don't think anybody would have predicted this, Chuck. So to say maybe fully go south, I don't know about that, but I would say that, you kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. You kept waiting for something else to happen, and it never happened. So now the question is, and I get this question a lot, so I'm sure you get the same question when you're out and about, is I have had a handful of people, including a couple of people tonight, say, are they going to be for real in the playoffs?
Yeah.
Every time you want to sit there and say, well, you look at on paper, their pitching is a little thin, and well, they can't hit left-handers, and well, this and that, and they've got, injuries to key players like Christian Yelich. Every time you say something like that, they just keep popping back up and surprising you and doing what they did on Sunday when people thought, okay, here it comes. They're going south against Arizona. Arizona's kind of their Achilles heel. It's the team that knocked them out last year. Well, all of a sudden they have like one of their best, if not their best rally of the entire season on Sunday. So right now, on paper, I guess you would say, Chuck, yeah, I don't know how they're going to do it, but they keep defying the odds. It's amazing.
Lance, I just think I told this to Doug Russell the other day. We're just conditioned as Milwaukee sports fans and Wisconsin sports fans just to think that something's going to go wrong. It just happens. It's in our DNA.
Yeah, I think most people. I mean, I try to be a little more positive and things like that. But you're right. The year that the Bucks even won it all, Giannis's knee goes the other direction, and I think everybody thought it was over. Like in the Eastern Conference Finals against the Atlanta Hawks, everybody just had that assumption. And the year that the Packers actually won the Super Bowl with Mike McCarthy, same thing. Look at all the injuries they had. They had to go on the road and win literally every week on the road. So you're right. It was. Well, that year was what? Philly, Atlanta, Chicago. I felt like was on the road forever. Dallas, the Super Bowl. But you're right. I think with the history and the track record of the Brewers, God bless the '82 team. But the documentary's out, and I'm sure you've seen it and about it, and we've both lived it. Is you just assume that they're just good enough to break your heart. But this year maybe they're not. Maybe they're too young to realize that they shouldn't be in this position.
Well, the documentary, I've lived it. I know about it, but I haven't seen it yet. I have not seen the documentary. I haven't had a time to go see it, but have you seen it?
I have not seen it as of yet, but it is on my list. I'm definitely going to go see it. Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. It's just been crazy. So I haven't had to do it. Most people think that the reason why the Brewers are not going to, if they don't do well, if they don't go far, is because of the starting pitching. I think it's like something in the middle of the order. I just feel like the Brewers, their detriment every year in the postseason has been their bats go silent, clutch hits, lack of clutch hittings. What do you think?
Yeah. Okay, is Freddy Peralta a true number one? I think that's probably something that you've bantered about quite often, Chuck, to be honest. And once again, he'll have that chance to prove himself come postseason. And I think Tobias Myers has been a very, very pleasant surprise. So you probably look at those two and say, okay, they do need some solid, maybe not spectacular, but solid performances out of both of them. I think that's an astute statement, Chuck, and I think that kind of ties into your whole Milwaukee is always kind of biting their fingernails and Milwaukee's always kind of fearing the worst, is because the last couple of postseasons we've seen that middle part of the order pretty much go south, go silent, not be non-existent, whatever you want to say. But once again, I mean, Jackson Chourio being 20 years old, does it really matter at this point? I don't know if it really does. I mean, with the season that he's put up and the things he's doing at such a young age, you've got Garrett Mitchell coming on at right exactly the right time. So you can flip a coin on that argument and say it could go either direction.
First of all, no one in the last forever years have never said I've made an astute statement on something, not even in my house. So this video is going to go right over in the room across the street here, so I can prove that somebody's actually thinks I got some intelligence.
Hall of Fame, baby. That's a Hall of Famer right there.
Hey, Lance. Chourio, he's surpassed our expectations. I remember in spring training, coming out of spring training, it was like, well, whatever we get out of Chourio, the guy's turning out to be the best player on this team.
So how many times did you hear in the offseason, Chuck, for those that don't follow the minor leagues or don't follow the prospects or whatever, this guy has never played a day in the major leagues. Why are they giving him $82 million? I've had that question come up. I've had people be adamant about that statement. And I say, okay, the professional sports, but, and baseball included, obviously, but professional sports, especially baseball, you pay on potential. You don't pay on what the production's already been. And the Brewers were very animate, and everything you saw was, okay, this guy looks pretty legit, whatever. I will go on record, Chuck, as saying you're going to look back at that 8-year, $82 million contract. So basically just a shade more than $10 million per year average. He is already producing it. Baseball contracts are already monopoly money. It's already funny money. So it's not anything you can compare to real life. Mm-hmm. And beyond that, Chuck, $10 million a year for a major leaguer, he is producing. Go look at it. Like if you go to arbitration or you go to like contract hearings or whatever you want to say, what the numbers he's already putting up are basically in that ballpark. We're going to look back on that contract and say, that was actually a bargain. That was unbelievable. Matt Arnold and his staff did an incredible job. And I'm sorry for the people who are like, I don't know this guy. Why are they giving him $82 million? They're not signing free agents in the offseason other than Reese Hoskins. They're cheap. They're not saving money. That's not true. They decided, in the offseason, instead of giving some long in the tooth free agent guy way too much money and have to eat the contract, the end of the contract, or overpay for somebody, whatever, they decided to invest in a guy that they believe is a generational talent. And so far, he's given us every reason to believe that's true. And I think that contract, looking back on it, is going to be looked at as a godsend.
Well, I think the baseball gods owe this one, because there's been certainly times in our past where we've given long-term contracts to people and it hasn't worked out. Now they've done, they put some money into this, but it's going to turn out, like you said, it's going to be a bargain. This one actually is going to work in our favor.
Yeah. And I think buying out the last 2 arbitration years, I think the age of the player being 20 years old, and the same thing, Chuck, is in the sense that, I think the contracts that everybody, looks back on with fear and trepidation are like the Suppan and the Kyle Loesch and the Matt Garzas. I mean, you give guys contracts and longer term contracts, and the last year or two, you're not getting really great production out of that or whatever. This is like, okay, he's not even close to his prime, and he's already putting up really good numbers. So I can't even imagine what he's going to do down the road. So, and I think they've learned from the past that it's better to pay early and pay on potential, whether it was Corbin Burns, Josh Hader, whatever example you want to use of late, locking those guys up earlier rather than later.
Well, I just hope down the road, I've mentioned this before on the podcast, Lance, that somebody doesn't put a bug in Chourio's ear. And he says, well, wait, and he becomes a unhappy camper.
I know where you're going. Yes, and unfortunately, that is part of the Milwaukee in me, Chuck, that has thought, at age 23, all of a sudden his agent or somebody is going to put in his ear, hey, you know that you have greatly outperformed this contract. That's the fear in every Milwaukee fan's heart.
All right, next week comes, there's a possibility of 3 or 4 different teams. What team do you want to see in Milwaukee? Not that you want to see any of these teams, or what team will you for sure not want to see the Brewers play in that wild card round, that best of 3?
Well, I mentioned them already, Chuck. I think the team that maybe some fans would say, okay, I don't want any part of them, is it seemed like for a while the Arizona Diamondbacks had their number. But now what happened on Sunday, I think it's kind of delicious irony, and it would be kind of cool to see maybe the Diamondbacks, because then you could, get revenge on them at the best possible time for what happened last year. I think the other delicious matchup is obviously the Mets, as you well know, if things fall a certain way and things like that, when you've got David Stearns, the former architect of the Brewers, who had at least a part to play in some of the current team, versus, his, I wouldn't say young understudy, because Matt Arnold had been with the Rays and is actually a little bit older than David Stearns, but obviously he was, underneath David Stearns in his tenure and things like that. So I think that's always good. You've got obviously various members of the Mets that spent time with the Brewers and things like that. So I think that would be a curious matchup to me as well. So, I think you got to look at it that way, and you think, hey, there's the possibility that could happen.
It's like the Atlanta Braves called me up the other day and asked me if, do some locker room stuff for them. And I was like, we definitely don't want to see you guys. I hope you're not going to get in. I know the Braves haven't had the greatest years. I just want to see the Braves. I don't know. I just something about the Braves that scare me again. I just, maybe because I'm thinking about,
I think
the Braves are a good team.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
I mean, I think the Padres are kind of that category too, where I just think that maybe things are kind of coming together for them right at the right time. You get a little bit of that magic dust, the triple play that they had, and all that stuff.
Oh God, unreal.
Yeah, it's unbelievable.
Unreal.
But you're right. I still think the Braves are, even though they've had bad injuries, weird things happen, whatever, they're still a scary team to deal with. So I'm with you on that.
I asked this to Doug. I'm going to ask this to you. Who is going to be Mr. October for the Brewers? Who is going to be the guy that carries the way for these guys? He said Chourio yesterday. Who are you going to say?
And Chourio would be the odds-on favorite, I would say. And I just think, he's got that specialness to him or whatever. But if you want me to go off the board, if you want me to go with somebody else.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't think he's had the greatest of years, and I think he would admit that or whatever. but Rhys Hoskins is a been there, done that guy. And
absolutely.
I think you're kind of a little bit in agreement, Chuck. You don't have to totally agree. You can disagree with me, whatever. But sometimes veterans, he came off a serious knee injury. Obviously didn't get a huge deal, but he got, in the mid 30s million, type contract.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes when you underperform a little bit or don't play that well or have bouts where you kind of go quiet or whatever, sometimes those guys really make their presence felt in the postseason. And I'm just going to come out and say it and think, you know what? I think he will be heard from come postseason.
I agree. And he's starting to heat up a little bit. He's due $18 million on a mutual interest, the Brewers and him. I kind of want Rhys around long term. I know, again, he hasn't made a great impression this year, but I think I want Rhys's, I'd give that guy a 3-year contract. I know I'm going to get destroyed on Twitter for that, but I'd rip it up and give Rhys a 3-year contract.
Well, and maybe it would be cheaper, than some of the other options. Like you already see the silly season already starting where we can talk about it. The Brewers will never talk about it, but Christian Walker or the Diamondbacks, and if you go out and get somebody who's younger, you go out and get somebody else, it's going to probably cost you more money in more years. So there's something to be said for that.
Lance, you are the best. Before I let you go, give me a prediction. How far is this going to go for the Brewers?
I say this time around, they get out of whatever the first round of the playoffs is.
Okay.
And then I think it ends, the second time around. But there's nothing to be ashamed of. Nobody would have predicted that. Yep. Obviously there were some people, Chuck, that predicted this team could finish in last in the National League Central. So I know that to quote Herm Edwards, you play to win the game. But I think winning a playoff series and getting to the next round and falling there, I think would be a phenomenal, final chapter to this year's Brewers, the 2024 Brewers.
Lance, thanks a lot for taking some time on your busy night tonight. Thank you very much. We will see you very soon, my friend. And word has it, you're getting back in the ring in December. What am I hearing about that? You putting your life on the line or what?
You've been talking to too many sources close to the situation, Chuck. I don't know.
I heard you're looking for a tag team partner. And I told this person, don't come looking at me for your meter tag team partner.
It's like the mafia, man. Every time I'm out, they pull me back in, brother. I don't know, but I'll see you in some playoff baseball. That's for
absolutely,
sure.
Absolutely. All right, Lance, talk to you soon.
No problem. Anytime.
That's Lance Allan, Locked On Brewers, part of Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day. Get us on Google, Spotify, Apple, on all the major downloads. And, of course, for your next listen, go to Locked On MLB. Our guy Sully's got a look around the major leagues later on this morning. My name is Chuck Freeman. Locked On Brewers, part of Locked On Podcast Network. We are your team every day.